Welcome to Road to Recovery.
Welcome to Road to Recovery, Advocacy and Insights for Trucking Accidents with Sagi Shaked. Sagi Shaked is the founder of Shaked Law, personal injury lawyers, and is ranked as one of the top 100 trial lawyers in the United States by the American Trial Lawyers Association. With a wealth of experience in personal injury, wrongful death, and complex litigation cases, he passionately advocates for victims and has recovered multi-million-dollar settlements in damages for his clients. I'm Lisa Mosbey, and today we're talking about financial losses in Florida wrongful death lawsuits and how families pursue compensation after losing a loved one in a devastating truck accident. Welcome, Sagi. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me.
Sagi, what types of financial losses can families pursue in Florida wrongful death cases after a fatal truck accident?
So, after a truck accident or any type of accident or crash that leads to a wrongful death, there are financial losses and there are non financial losses. So, you have the economics, which we'll call financial losses, and the non economics. So, for purposes of your question, I'm just going to focus on the economics. So, economics would be the lost wages, loss of support, and we'll talk about that in a second. I just want to make sure that there's a distinction between the non-economics, which are the pain, suffering, the mental anguish that the family and survivors go through. So right now, we're just going to talk about the financial losses. So think about a financial losses, loss of support and services. So support would be the financial help, and services would be the things that the individual did for the family. So think about the paycheck the person would have. Health insurance comes into it if they lost health insurance as a result, retirement contributions, pension benefits, household work, child care. Because again, if mom's not taking care of the child, who's taking care of the child after school? Those are all things that we don't think about, but you need someone to think about those things. Transportation, um, maintenance of the home, financial guidance, helping care for children, or if it's elderly, helping care for the elderly. The whole point of the financial is to put them back in the same position they would have been in had that individual not passed away or not been wrongfully killed or lost their life in a truck accident. So the goal is to put them back into the same financial security they had before the crash.
So it's more complicated than just their weekly paycheck if they were employed and working. So, how do lawyers calculate lost future income when the person who passed away was financially supporting the family?
So I think you start with the person's, the easiest way is you start with the person's earning history, right? You look at their W-2s. If they're independent contractors, you look at their 1099, the pay stub, employment records, business records. Um, and then we look at what is the prospect of the person's ability to earn in the future. So you're looking at the person's age, their work history, their education, their career paths, promotions. They're looking at, again, their history in the past, raises, bonuses, retirement age, work life expectancy, how much they would have made in income would have gone to the family. They call that net accumulations. So the law focuses on what the survivors have lost. And so we need experts to help determine that, right? And then we need experts to help reduce that loss to to present value, those future losses to the present value, meaning today. Because a dollar today is not the same thing that a dollar was, say, in the 1950s, where, you can buy a Coke can for 5 cents, but you can't buy anything today for 5 cents, right? So in simple terms, we want to know what this person would have earned, how long they would have worked, how much support they provided the family, and what is it worth today? So that's kind of what we're looking for in a nutshell.
And then can compensation include benefits like health insurance, retirement contributions? You mentioned those in the first answer, or other types of financial support that the family has now lost.
Right. So I think everybody thinks, when you think about it, they think paycheck, paycheck, paycheck. It's not just a paycheck because with that paycheck, like you said, brings about you get your health insurance, and that has a value. You get sometimes dental insurance, that has a value. Vision insurance, that has a value. The family enjoys those benefits. So if they have retirement benefits, that has a value. Life insurance benefits, that has a value. 401k, pension benefits, disability coverage, all these things were paid into for a reason. So there's value to all of that. Profit sharing, if the person has the ability to get profits, um, paying off the mortgage, that has value to it, or using a company vehicle. If you had use of it and you didn't have to pay for a vehicle, that's a value too that that job provided. So it's really up to the lawyer to look into that, not just say, this is what they made on a paycheck and that's what we want. You want to get the full measure of damages, not just what was the paycheck, because that's what I think everybody thinks. What was the financial support that this person brought to the family unit? So there's more to it than just a paycheck.
And beyond the financial losses, how can the loss of a parent or spouse affect damages beyond their income and their earnings?
So aside from the emotional part of it, think about the guidance that the family member brings. So there's the financial harm, right? And that's obviously valuable to the family. Even if there's no paycheck, think about a spouse who takes care of the home, managing the home. That's a full time job. Raising the children. That's another full time job. So now they have two jobs. When we think of a stay at home mom as having one job, it's really not. There's the cooking, there's the cleaning, there's the repairs, there's the taking care of the children. There's scheduling. There's transporting. You become like an Uber driver, right? You're doing everything, budgeting, emotional support, childcare, transportation. So there's those things that have to come in mind, and it's not necessarily financial and it's not emotional, but it's the support, it's the services. Um, think about a parent's guidance, um, discipline that they teach, school help if the child needs help in school, or coaching or life lessons. I mean, these are all things that come from being a parent, and it's daily. What if it's a young child? It's daily care. Who's going to take care of that child? Who's going to teach them safety? Who's going to provide a safe environment for them? Those are all real losses that you really don't think about, and hopefully nobody ever has to think about that. But it's not just the economic component, and it's not just the pain and suffering component. There's so many other components, like again, that services component that we just don't think about when we have one of these cases.
Yeah, having somebody else raise your children, how do you put a value on that? What are the damages what is that worth? But we're going to get to that in a second here. First, can you share an example of a wrongful death case where the long-term financial impact on the family became a major part of the claim? Or do they all?
It's in a lot of cases, especially when you have someone who's younger, or say someone in their 40s and they have a spouse with a couple of children. Now, the first thing that always comes up in these cases, um, once you get over the shock, is, whoa, we've got burial costs, funeral costs, we've got medical bills to pay, and there's no paychecks coming in. What do you do? How do you make a house payment? How do you pay to bury the person? So in Florida, if it's a trucking or an auto accident, there's in every policy, there's something called PIP benefits, personal injury protection benefits, and that provides immediate relief of $5,000 for what they call a death benefit, that you can get to help deal with the funeral expenses. But that's really the small portion of it. There's so much more damage than that. Again, think about it. We just settled a case not too long ago for a lot of money, but that husband was the sole supporter of the family. The mom raised the child, and now she doesn't have any more income. She doesn't have anyone to pay the mortgage. She doesn't want have anyone to pay the insurance, anyone to pay the gas, anyone to pay anything. When that was the husband's job to go work. The mom was raising the child. And so you lose 20 years of income. You lose 20 years of health insurance coverage. You lose the retirement savings. You lose someone helping pay the mortgage, someone paying the household services, the future of the child, and the career path of the child. All that is lost, and it's all lost in one moment because some truck driver or trucking company was negligence. And so you have those financial losses, those loss of support and services, and you have the emotional losses. So again, it's not just a paycheck, it's not just that mortgage. There's so much more to it. What did the family lose? Not just in 1 month, but it's a lifetime, the rest of their lives. Again, I'm not even talking about the emotional issue of the young child or children who now don't have a father or don't have a mother. That's completely different. This is just financial and services.
So, Sagi, how do experts help project what a family may lose financially years into the future? I know you were saying, like a year ago or years ago, a can of Coke cost 5 cents. What would it cost today? But how do we really project? What tools do they have available to them so that they can get an accurate number?
Right. So, as the attorney, you're gathering all this information and then you're going to get experts involved. So, some of the information you're getting, and one of the experts would be an economist who's going to put it all together for us. But some of the information you're getting are the lost wages, the what we know is what's their future earning capacity for that person. What kind of benefits would they have gotten? Got to figure out. The economist is going to figure out inflation because remember we just said today the dollar today is not the same as a dollar 20 years from now. Work life expectancy, and then bringing it all down to the present value of today so they can get the benefit today and not 20 years from now when it's not the same value. So if there was a person in a specific job, a vocational expert may be able to explain that person's career path and earning potential. A life care or house services may be able to value the services the person brought to the home. If it was a stay-home parent, right? The expert, we don't ask the expert to guess. We ask them to use real data based on work history, statistics, and accepted economic methods that they use. So depending on the job they lost over time, in simple terms, what you really want to know is um, what would this person have provided to the family? How long could they have provided it? And what's it worth in today's dollars? And that's how the expert would talk to the jury about it for the long term.
So even if the individual that passed was not the primary income earner, there is still a way to put a value on some of these things. The role that a mom plays if they're taking care of their children and their house and all of the future plans for their children. There's values that get put on this. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's an enormous financial value. And again, you don't realize it. Take myself, for example, when my kids were little, um, it was always easier to go to work than to stay home with the kids because it is so hard. It is so hard when the kids were being raised and I saw my wife doing it. It is it's a tough job. It's harder than going to work because you're dealing with the kids and you have to have patience and you're still going to take care of the home, the cooking, the cleaning, the driving them to school, the managing their doctor's appointments, taking care of them, helping out. I mean, it just there's managing the household is so much more difficult, especially if there's kids involved, than going to work. Okay, going to work, you do your job and you move on. But managing that, so there's such a value that a spouse that stays home brings that it's more than just they were a stay home so they don't have any value, financial value. It's the exact opposite. They have huge financial value, and that carries a lot of weight. And I think people do put a value on that. Juries do, at least, that there is a value to a stay-home parent. It's not just they stayed home and did nothing. There's sometimes it's a choice and sometimes it's not a choice, but a stay-home parent has huge financial, um, what's the word I'm looking for? Huge, it's an enormous value that they bring to the home, and there has to be something that you can put together and put it together for the jury.
Sure. I imagine that these numbers are somewhat subjective. So, do insurance companies challenge these financial calculations? And then, what kinds of arguments do they typically make? How do you defend it?
So they definitely challenge them because those numbers can be significant in a case, right? So they're challenging that the person wouldn't have worked that long. Instead of saying they worked till 67, 70, or 65, they say no, they would have retired earlier, or the person wouldn't have earned that much. This is all speculation. That career path is speculation, especially if you have someone who's younger. Let's say they have great aspirations, or let's say they're an athlete and they could have gone to a specific professional sport and made money. You see that happening a lot. They challenge it. So they challenge the person. If the person had health issues, they could have changed jobs. They might have retired early. The economists use assumptions that are too high. The value of the household services is exaggerated. It doesn't cost that much money to get that person. So they'll hire experts to bring down the value of the case. That's kind of what they do. So our best evidence would be, again, work history, the before and after people who know that person, how they work, the tax records, expert testimony to talk about all this stuff, the employer testimony, the family testimony, the benefit records that they had, the household role. I don't know why I said that that way. The career trajectory. The goal is to get the numbers, the real human value of those numbers, and make it indefensible for the defense, because they're always going to try to, no matter what you have, they always try to chip away at, hurting families and people who have gone through these tragic times.
Yeah, it's always a negotiation. I know you've mentioned before that you've been in this industry, in this world for 26 years. I would venture to guess that you've probably seen cases where there was an undervaluing of future financial losses. Have you witnessed how that affects a family long term if they don't get this piece right?
Yeah, so now it's 2026 and you start seeing it. I have people calling me, hey, you represented me 20 years ago and my family, thank you. And they're thanking me. And it really makes me feel good that we were able to do justice for them and they still have money to take care of them. Because remember, if you don't get them the money for or think about these things, the mortgage payments, the rent payments, the health insurance, the child care, college expenses, retirement, medical costs, daily living expenses. We don't think about these things because it's a tragic situation and we want it far away from us. Unfortunately, I have to see it all the time in what I do. And so it becomes real. So we really have to, as plaintiffs lawyers and lawyers representing people, we have to think about the support, the services, the protection, and what the family really loses, aside from the emotional, because we're just talking about financial. What do they really lose in the future? And then you have to bring it to make it into real life so the jury understands it. And not just for today, give them real life examples. And, the Coke can is one of them, but give them real life examples of what happens over the next 50 years for this young child who lost their parent and how that affects them, aside from the emotional stuff.
Sagi, I might be biased, but if I were in that situation, I'd want you on my side. I want to thank you
Oh,
for
thanks,
today's
Lisa.
conversation. Yeah,
Hopefully it'll
always.
never happen. We
Hopefully
don't
it'll
want
never
that to
happen.
happen.
Yeah, but we know that you're out there and you're supporting these families and you're working on their behalf, and you do it with such heart. So thank you for all that you do and for your time today walking us through this process.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode of Road to Recovery, Advocacy and Insights for Trucking Accidents. If you'd like to learn more about Sagi Shaked and his work at Shaked Law, personal injury lawyers, visit shakedlaw.com. You'll find resources to help you understand your rights after a serious trucking accident and what it takes to protect your future. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and leave us a review if you found this episode helpful. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.